Step into the Trademark, your go-to podcast for everything marketing in the trades. Hosted by award-winning industry marketing experts Sarah Gerardo from Remarketable and Eric Thomas from Rival Digital. Together, we're here to unite the worlds of trades and marketing, bringing you insights, stories, and strategies from the heart of the industry. Whether you're a trade professional, a marketing expert, or somewhere in between, this is the place for you. Listen in as we're here for the big ideas, the game changers, and the everyday successes. Because at the Trademark, we're with the trades and for the trades.
All right. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the TradeMarke Podcast. Flying solo today, but I'm excited because we've got a really awesome guest joining us today. Got Donovan Ryckis with us from Ethos Benefits. Donovan, how are you doing?
Doing really good. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and just kind of jump right into it. Donovan, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit more, about yourself, about what you do, and some of the things that you're seeing out there in the industry right now.
Sure. Yeah. So Donovan Ryckis with Ethos Benefits. What we do is we consult employers on their healthcare problem. And I state it that way because every employer has one. It's just big or small or screaming this year, or it's not yet. And maybe next year it will be. It's a top 3 P&L expense for all businesses, and it's unsustainable, the path that we've taken. And, my job is basically to look at it from a different angle because what we're doing is not working. The trend is unstable, and we just consult with employers to kind of understand it better and get them in a better place.
Yeah. So what inspired you to start this venture and to get into this world?
Yeah, kind of a different path. So I was actually a securities advisor. So I had a registered investment advisory. So in my business, I was working with business owners largely on their own personal wealth, but also on their defined benefit, defined contribution plans. So their 401ks and pensions, because there's a whole lot of tax strategies that business owners could use as the kind of what we're taking advantage of. So that is what I was doing. I loved doing it. I was very well paid. I thought it was going to be kind of the pinnacle of my career in financial services until one day a client asked me to look at his healthcare plan. So we were doing his 401k and he called me kind of panicked. And he's like, listen, my broker said we're going to have a 40% increase in my healthcare plan. There's nothing you can do. This is the best option. Can you help me out? And I guess either because he was a client or I thought it wouldn't be hard, or I'm not sure why I said yes. So I basically, I said, yeah. I'm like, all right, yeah, sure. I'll try to help. I was like, send me everything you had. And I carefully worded it that way because I had no idea what kind of data there was in a healthcare plan, what I would need to fix it, how to measure it. Like, no idea. Clueless, right? And what I did is I took all the data he sent me, everything he had, right? And I made as many contacts as I could in the industry to understand the problem and people who were kind of dealing with it in the right way. And the takeaway after 3 weeks of work, I mitigated his 40% increase entirely. And we didn't take away benefits from the employees. We didn't increase their premiums. We didn't put them in a smaller, tighter network with less access, right? And I realized, hey, if I could figure that out my first go around, not having any clue what I'm doing, while his publicly traded broker said this is it, there's a problem here, and all businesses are just really created to solve problems. So from that point on, I kind of realized hey, as much conflicts of interest and problems people think are in financial services or securities advice, that kind of stuff, it pales in comparison to healthcare. And, we need to get this message out. And from that point on, it was healthcare only.
Nice. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing, just in that industry in particular, right? I guess right now it's this employer sponsored healthcare.
Yeah. I mean, some pretty damning trends. 20 years ago, this country was spending about 1.7 trillion. In 2024, it's closer to 4.6 trillion. And most of that is inflation. And I don't mean general inflation. I mean medical inflation, which, as you might guess, sounds like a totally made up thing. And in large part it is, right? But even if we look at it from a smaller time horizon, if we look at 2019 to 2024, the premiums for a family rate in employer-sponsored healthcare have gone up 24%. So all in all, like we're just on this wildly unsustainable path. And for it being, a top three expense for business owners, like it is just unsustainable, whether or not an employer has started to see that or they're about to, like it's just kind of coming for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. I definitely want to kind of dig into that a little bit because, most of our listeners run, trades businesses like HVAC, plumbers, electricians, roofers, definitely the industries where, having, insurance, in particular, having, healthcare and health benefits for their employees is important. What's just some baseline recommendations that you give often to business owners, when it comes to this particular topic?
Yeah. I'd say it's way more straightforward than people think. And like the best place to start really is just like with a paradigm shift of like how we think about this and maybe even how it's been explained to people in the past. And, the first thing I think about is like how we think of insurance, because generally we always relate to how we understand things in our personal lives. And insurance is for the unlikely or untimely event of something occurring, right? So unlikely event, your house burns down, untimely event of your death. Like those are insurances personally that we use. When we're talking about an employer sponsored healthcare plan, it is completely different. It is 100% predictable that it will be used and likely every single day. Somebody's kid is getting a prescription. Somebody else is going into urgent care. Somebody has a specialist visit. Like it is just going to get used every single day. And that's not unexpected. And you're not unlucky as a business. So once we realize that, we understand just like everything else in the business, like the only equation, the only conversation we really need to have is what is the cost of those things that we're doing and how does that benchmark in our state, in our industry, in our county, where our employees are located, and just working on those actual costs instead of thinking of this differently as just like one annual price at the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at your website now. This is a topic I think like is so just providing healthcare for employees. Like I think it's a very interesting topic because it's like you mentioned, it's one of your most costly expenses that you have and you have to have it.
Yep.
I guess you don't have to have it, but it makes it very tough for you to be competitive, in the recruitment side of things, to get
Certainly.
good, quality talent if you don't offer any type of healthcare. Are there any particular like trends or anything that you're seeing, right now in that, I guess in that side? I don't know. I would say I'm probably not as educated as you might be in it. So, forgive me, but just any trends in particular that you're seeing that folks should be kind of looking for when it comes to maybe even picking a provider for this?
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with a couple of things. I think the first place anybody should start is understanding the compensation incentives of the person they're hiring, right? If you're gonna hire an employee, like you're going to incentivize them for behaviors that are aligned with the outcomes that you want in your business with your clients, right?
Yeah.
So the first step that businesses totally miss is usually they have 99 out of 100 don't even know the compensation model of the broker. So they don't know how they're getting paid, when they get paid more. How did that compare to the other choices that were out there for them? Did they look at all the other choices? So that's the first place to start. And it's really kind of the last place in anybody's business where they don't understand that. Like they understand their CPA's incentive model, their attorneys, every employee they hire. But this is kind of one of those last pieces where they don't, because we've just made it confusing as an industry. We haven't talked about it. And that goes kind of back to my start. When I was a securities advisor, I was a fiduciary securities advisor, which means I have to explain that. I have no conflicts of interest. Here are my compensation models. It's only for you. I'm acting in your best interest every day. So first place to start really for businesses is asking those questions. Like, can I see your compensation disclosure? How do you get paid? When do you get paid more? What are your bonuses? And that kind of at least starts the conversation in the right way.
Yeah.
And then I think taking that and combining it, the annual renewal conversation goes, you're getting an increase because of these claims. And oh my God, you're incredibly unlucky. You have 100 people and there's somebody who has cancer. Again, not unlucky, totally predictable that out of 100 people, one person will have cancer, right?
Yeah.
So the second thing is kind of shifting the conversation and saying like, what is the actual cost of those claims? And can we benchmark it? And then we're going to separate that into a hospital category and a RX category and kind of figure out what our solutions are.
Yeah. So when you're asking someone like about their compensation model, what are some red flags that, a business owner could be on the lookout for there?
Yeah. So good question. So the biggest one that we see is that they get paid as a percentage of premium. Obviously that conflict's easy to spot, right? The more premiums go up, the more they're getting paid. Like it blows my mind, but that still exists today prevalently where it's, anywhere from 5 to 10%. The other thing, other than the fact that you guys want two different goals at that point in time, is that percentage, whatever that percentage works out to, is usually not tied to any kind of agreement for like scope of services. Like, what are they doing for that? Are they doing all your benefits administration platform, all your employee engagement and communications? Are they doing claim support and advocacy and all your compliance? Like, there's nothing, you know what I mean? There's not an agreement tied there. So it's kind of like made up insurance premium number, made up percentage, and then they just kind of do what they do. Right.
Yeah.
Because what you'll see is that percentage obviously is increasing, but you're getting less and less of what you hoped for in an outcome. So that's for sure the first thing.
Yeah. Any others that come to mind? I always like to ask these type of questions because I feel like the red flags are like, the things you should look out, you should be on the lookout, for is always, good things for folks to know about.
Yeah. So you should have already been provided a compensation disclosure. We are seeing some companies do it. If they do, they kind of slip it in. It's not really well explained. So that started with the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. So you should have been getting compensation disclosure since then, but I've seen them be very sneaky. So no percentages, change that to a per employee per month, and then scope that and say, what kind of services exactly, all of them, are you doing for that work? And that way we're setting the compensation model to how many employees they're servicing for you, regardless of what your premium is. Like, your premium should not matter at all. It should be, we're doing these services for you for this many employees, and that's going to be it. And then the third thing would be incentives and bonuses. So every single broker out there gets bonuses, extra incentives, trips, whatever it might be. But these can be sizable. It could be a fourth, it could be a third of the revenue from that account. And it's kind of on the top. And the problem with it is at that point, you're entering in an arrangement where as an employer, you're not setting the incentives. The insurance company is setting the incentives and the broker is following those. So same idea, like hiring that employee, you're not going to let your customers incentivize your employee. You're going to incentivize them for the behaviors you need.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know any of that at all.
Yeah. It's disclosed now most of the time. You'll see it in very small print.
Yeah.
They usually won't tell you how much it is. They'll just say, oh, we could get a bonus. It'll be up to this much. So, if that's what you're seeing, you should be asking, okay, well, I know you got one last year. So why don't you tell me exactly what your bonus was last year? I understand you won't know what it is for this upcoming year, but you need to either estimate it for me or tell me what you got.
Yeah. I feel like financial advisors and anything related to like health insurance or benefits, like it's just a totally different conversation to have with the broker. Like, as a salesperson selling you a roof, it's like, yeah, you're going to get a commission for selling me this roof.
Mhm.
But I know, like, I give you $10,000, you give me a roof and you keep, you get a bonus. It's like especially financial advisors, they always try to hit you with 58 pages of confusion. And you're just like, what are you talking about? And then, yeah, the next thing you know, like you're paying for stuff and you're like, well, what is this even for?
So, and that's the good and the bad thing, right? So like the interesting difference coming from securities and going into healthcare. When you're dealing with securities, like when I was advising on securities, like I have to give you those 58 pages and probably 100 more. Like you have a right to have access to all that information, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to healthcare, like you can enter into a plan with even 300, 400 employees and get no information in return, right? So don't ask me what the cost of your drugs are in comparison to what the rest of the market is paying. Don't ask how much we're paying this hospital for this procedure in comparison to the market. Don't ask what my profit was, right? Like none of that stuff, right? So that was the biggest difference is coming into it, because when you look at most companies in general, like one, there's more participants in the healthcare plan than there are the 401k typically.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also taking more of the employee dollars are going towards healthcare than they are in the 401k. So we're literally putting them in a strategy that robs them of their future because they're not able to contribute, all while kind of being in the dark about it, right? Not understanding how the model works, not having anything to benchmark it against. And, potentially not even having somebody that's like aligned to have that conversation with you as a business owner and say, like, what can we actually do here? Right? Like, what are the measures we can do?
Yeah. Yeah. There's another, I guess, like in regards to like reducing costs, because I know you mentioned earlier on that it's like, obviously it's number 2 or number 3 up on the list. And when you're looking at a P&L statement, for what you're paying for, are there any ways that, a trades business owner could reduce costs while still being kind of employee centric and offering good healthcare? Yeah.
100%. The best thing about any effective strategy in reducing costs on healthcare plans is that first, it's going to help the employee and they're going to like it and see the reduced payment amounts and the benefits. And then the employer will see it in a reduction of claim. Because if you think about a medical claim, there's some kind of split going on there, right? That's co-insurance. So maybe the employee's paying for 10%, 20% till they hit their deductible or whatever. So there are tons of things we can do. So if we break this down and just think of it as drugs and then hospital claims, like those are going to be your 2 biggest buckets, right? No company's problem ever has been that every single person sees the primary once a month. Like that's just not how it works. Like typically it's less than 5% of the population making up over 80% of the claim spend in any year.
Oh, wow.
Again, that's kind of one of those things. Like we need to quit thinking of it as an insurance product because all these things are predictable and measurable because we're dealing with a large group now. We're not dealing with individual insurances. So on the drug side, part of your healthcare plan has what's called the PBM. It is a pharmacy benefit manager. So that's just the piece of your healthcare plan that's going to be deciding what drugs are getting dispensed at what price. And that's their only job. The unfortunate thing is like, this is not a conversation that ever happens with employers. That piece gets bundled in. It's not even like, you won't usually see that term at all in a renewal presentation, in a discussion, but there are fiduciary pharmacy benefit managers and there are non-fiduciary pharmacy benefit managers. So if you're hiring somebody and their only job is to set the price of drugs, you want them to be a fiduciary because that means they're going to act in your best interest, disclose all their compensation, right? Like they're working for you and the plan participants. So that's the easiest thing you can do because unfortunately what that pharmacy benefit manager does, they're usually owned by the insurance company and then they put a spread price in the cost of the drug, right?
Okay.
So they might be charging the plan, like if we're talking like a Humira, like $7,000, they're getting a rebate for maybe 5. They're keeping that rebate, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff. So either holding on to rebates, spread pricing in between the drugs. That is the easiest thing to fix just by putting a fiduciary pharmacy benefit manager. We can usually lower plans overall spend by 15 to 20%.
Oh, wow.
Great thing about it, we're not disrupting anybody. We don't need the employees to go to different pharmacies. We don't need them to stop taking their drugs. We don't need to do anything. We're just literally fixing the middleman that doesn't get talked about.
Interesting. Is that something that your firm typically does, or what are some ways that you guys tailor your services towards your clients?
Yeah, 100%. So that's part of it. So kind of going back a little bit, if you think of like a healthcare plan, there's only 4 pieces. So whether or not, most employers aren't aware of this, but like there's only 4 main services in a healthcare plan, whether or not it's ever a discussion or not, right? So you have your administrator, who's like answering the phone, paying the bills, more commonly known as TPA, third party administrator, right? Next thing you have is your network. So your network is what your employees think of when they think of insurance. So they think, hey, I have this PPO network. When I go to the doctor, that's what I tell them, right? The third piece is the actual insurance, and that's what's going to cover the company for those 5% or less of claims that are catastrophic to make sure that's not risk the employer's taking on, right? And then the fourth thing is the pharmacy benefit manager that's setting the price of drugs, right? Mm-hmm. Admin, network for the employees, actual insurance for the company, pharmacy benefit manager setting the price of drugs. So the whole name of the game really is just getting data and transparency for those 4 pieces instead of pretending like they're one thing. Because if we pretend like they're one thing, what happens is employers see the same 1 to 3 options every single year, and that's it. And the truth is, like, we can measure and manage and make each one of those pieces accountable and open up the market. Instead of looking at 3 insurance carriers, we quote out 25. Instead of looking at 3 PBMs, I probably have a dozen fiduciary PBMs that we could put in, right? Yeah. So now we're like working on measuring, managing, fixing each piece one at a time. And that's all you need to do to change the outcomes.
Okay. Interesting. Is there anything that I haven't asked yet that you feel like I've missed out on, or our listeners should definitely hear?
Yeah, I think the last piece really is just briefly kind of going over the hospital charges. Like, I think every American inherently knows, like, the price we pay for drugs in this country is outrageous. The price we pay for hospitals, for any type of claim in a hospital, is entirely outrageous and made up. And that's another big thing that we focus on, because the claims that make up companies' overspend is a pretty small percentage as a whole, right? It's those 5% or less of claimants. And usually they're having 1 or 2 episodes that are driving that cost up for them. So that's the biggest thing we're working on. So when anybody goes and gets something done in a hospital, whether they're getting literally a Kleenex or an open heart surgery, that is described as a CPT code, which is just a procedural code for that service. So everybody knows what they're billing for, what got done, right? The thing to know about hospitals in this country is that cost is not set per procedure, it's set per payer. So if you send 10 people into the same hospital with different insurance cards, you're going to get 10 different invoices.
Yeah.
So if as a company, you haven't had that conversation and you're not benchmarking and you don't know where you fall on that spectrum, I guarantee you're not on the good end, right?
Yes.
That's another thing we're doing is on that small percentage of large hospital claims, we're negotiating those on behalf of the employer to get fair reimbursement rates. And they are ridiculous and all over the map. I'll give 2 quick examples of some recent ones. One was a skin graft on a finger. The hospital was trying to pre-authorize a surgery for $93,000. $3,000, which sounds kind of ridiculous for a finger. Like he wasn't getting a bionic finger. It was just a skin graft to cover up the top of his finger that got amputated, right? We moved him to a different facility with the exact same surgeon and got the procedure done without delay for $3,000. So same doctor. We said, hey, where else do you have privileges? Hey, I have privileges at this surgical center. Perfect. Let's schedule it there. Got it done. 93 to 3,000 done. Right. Another great example that we have a lot with our trades companies is pregnancies. And this one is all over the map. So pregnancy is an ideal claim because the hospital knows it's coming. They have plenty of time. It's scheduled. Like you have a customer in advance. Like it's perfect. Now I know I'm going to have this customer in 7 months come deliver. It's great business model, actually, right? But what they try to do is inflate these prices. So, we've been having some issues in some states where they're trying to, for normal kind of scheduled, no complication vaginal delivery, they're trying to invoice the insurance somewhere between $36,000 and $40,000. If that patient were to cash pay for that same pregnancy, you're looking at under $6,000, right?
Yeah.
So, and what's the difference? Why do they have to pay more as a company if you're processing through insurance, right? So that's another scenario where we've basically organized cash pays in advance to get that service done, but get the best price. Because with our trades companies, if we have 200 employees, we're probably doing 4 to 6 babies every single year, right?
Yeah.
So that one's happening a lot. So that's those two highlight real well, how ridiculous and all over the map hospital prices are, but also how few you need to fix to put you in a better scenario for your healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're getting close here on time, Donovan. I've really appreciated chatting with you about this. This is something that I don't get to talk about very often. So it was definitely just great insight for me. And I know our listeners definitely appreciate it as well. Where's some places that our listeners can find you at if they want to learn more or reach out to schedule a consultation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'd say 2 things. Obviously, LinkedIn, I'm there. Donovan Ryckis, Ethos Benefits. Also on our website. So we produced a healthcare documentary last year. You're only going to hear me 90 seconds of it. The rest is clinicians, attorneys, former insurance executives, practice owners, former brokers, human resources at companies, right? So it's people in very big positions, big companies kind of talking about this problem. It does a great job of defining and outlaying the complications we face, but also some options to kind of get through it. That is available on my website for free before it hits streaming platforms. So you guys can get access to it now. So that's ethosbenefits.com/documentary, or I think it's under the services tab that you find the documentary, and you can get a copy of that to watch.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll go ahead and link that down in the show notes as well. Donovan, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're probably a little tired after that long flight back from the West Coast. So I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to chat with me. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Trademark, where we bridge the worlds of the trades and marketing, one story at a time. We can't wait to see you next time. Thank you to the trades for giving back big, loving big, and taking massive action. Don't forget to join us next time for more engaging conversations and innovative ideas. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and share it with your colleagues and friends in the trades and marketing. Your support means the world to us. Stay connected with us off the air by following us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts and get your feedback. Until next time, keep making your mark in the trades. Thank you for listening to The Trademark. Goodbye for now, and remember, we're with the trades for the trades.